All right, so continuing on, we're going to talk about consecutive interior angles. They are also sometimes called same side interior angles. Okay, and so they lie between the two lines on the same side of the transversal. So if we look up at what we've done, we've had these alternate angles in the last two examples. So that means they were on opposite sides of the transversal. Exterior angles were on the outside and they were opposite the transversal. Interior angles were on the inside and they were opposite of the transversal. Consecutive interior angles are going to be on the same side of the transversal and they must be in between or inside of the lines, okay? So we can't have consecutive angles on the outside. We can only have consecutive angles on the inside, okay? So if I look at this, angle 1 and angle 2, they are consecutive interior angles or same side interior angles. They are inside your lines, but they are on the same side of the transversal. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 2 are consecutive interior angles. I could do it the same on the other side if I had 3 and 4. Those are going to be considered consecutive interior angles. So same side of the transversal on the inside of the lines, parallel lines. All right, moving on. So let's look at this all together, okay? We're going to list out all of the angles that fit the description. So corresponding, that was the first angle that I looked at. Those are going to be the angles that occupy the same position, okay? So if I looked here, I had 1 and 2. Those were occupying the same position along the lines, okay? So the corresponding angle here is, let's start with number 1, okay? If I look at number 1, it is above this line to the left, okay? So I've got angle 1. If I move down to this line, above this line to the left is angle 5. So angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. All right, I could do the same thing on the other side. Above this line to the right is 2. Above this line to the right is 6. 2 and 6 are corresponding. All right, let's move down. Below the line to the left is 3. Below this line to the left is 7. Angle 3 and angle 7. And then number 4. Below this line to the right is 4. Below this line to the right is 8. Angle 4 and angle 8. Okay? Now let's find alternate exterior angles. So remember, exterior angles are on the outside of our line. So they're not going to be the angles in the middle. They're going to be the angles on the outside of our railroad tracks. So we're looking at these, and I only have the options of 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. Those are the exterior angles. And remember, the word alternate means opposite of your transversal. Okay, so if I'm looking at this exterior angle 1, if I look at the opposite side of the transversal, the exterior angle for angle 1 is going to be angle 8. All right. The same thing for angle 2. If I'm on the right side of my transversal out here, the opposite side would be angle 7 on the outside of this line. Angle 2 and angle 7. Okay. On that same note, except moving to the interior, we're going to find angles that are opposite the transversal on the inside of our lines. So if I start with 3, the opposite angle on the inside is 6. So angle 3 and angle 6 are alternate interior angles. And if I look at angle 4, angle 5 is opposite of the transversal and would be the alternate interior angle for angle 4. Okay? Consecutive interior angles, those were the ones that are the only time where they're not alternate. Okay, so we had alternate exterior and alternate interior, but if you've got consecutive interior, that's when you've got angles on the inside of your lines that are not alternating over the transversal. Okay, so I'm only going to be looking at the numbers inside, or the angles inside of my lines, and consecutive interior have to be on the same side. So angle 3 and angle 5 are consecutive interior angles. And angle 4 and angle 6 are going to be consecutive interior angles. Okay? And then one thing that we didn't talk about that we won't see very often, and that's spelled wrong, we don't need another S, are consecutive exterior angles. And so those are angles that are the same, they're just like consecutive interior, but they're going to be on the outside. So consecutive exterior would be same side on the outside. So we would have angle 1 and angle 7, and then angle 2 and angle 8. So the toughest part about this section is just remembering what each of these mean and then identifying the angles that match up with what that's telling you to do. Okay? So let's move into some of our postulates. Okay? So I have the corresponding angles postulate, and this is going to tell me that if I have parallel lines, if I know that those lines are parallel, that means I'm going to have some angles that are congruent. I'm going to have corresponding angles that are congruent. I'm also going to have alternate interior angles congruent, alternate exterior angles congruent, consecutive interior angles are going to be supplementary. So I'm going to show you what all that's going to look like. But this is only the case if you are told you have parallel lines. You have to be told you have parallel lines. So up here, even though these lines may look parallel, I was not given any information that they are parallel, so I cannot say that any of these angles are congruent. But once I have lines that are given to me that are parallel, then I can figure out which angles are going to be congruent, okay? So we'll come back to that diagram on the back. I want us to come over here, okay? So it only tells me that the measure of angle 5 is 72 degrees. And from this one angle, I am going to be able to figure out all the other angles on this diagram, okay? All right, so if I am looking at angle 5, there's multiple ways that I can do these angles and figure out what all the angles are going to be, okay? But let's start off with something that we just learned, okay? So if I have angle 5, if I am looking at this line, this is below, oh, and by the way, these arrows right here identify that these lines are parallel. If you have arrows on your lines, that's going to tell you that you have parallel lines, and that is why we now can use the congruency postulates and theorems to prove what all these other angles are. Okay, but you have to be told you have parallel lines. All right, so again, if I'm looking at angle 5, it is below this line P to the left, okay? If I look up here at angle N and I want to find the corresponding angle would be in the same position as angle 5. So I'm going to look at this line below to the left. Angle 4 is right there. Because I have corresponding angles and parallel lines, those angles are going to be congruent. So angle 4 is going to be 72 degrees as well. Okay, so I can put 72 degrees in here. All right. Now, let's look at alternate exterior angles. Okay, so I have angle 5. I can tell that that's an exterior angle because it is on the outside of my lines N and P. Okay, so it's on the outside. It is not in between. It is an exterior angle. If I use alternate exterior angles, I know that opposite side of the transversal, along with number 5, would be angle 2. And because I have alternate exterior angles, those angles are going to be congruent. So angle 2 is 72 degrees. Now, you also can check your work here because if you notice, these are vertical angles. 2 and 4 are vertical angles because you have these two intersecting lines, and two intersecting lines create these opposite angles that are congruent. So again, if this is 72, this should also be 72, and we proved that it is by alternate exterior angles. Okay? Well, let's see. Okay, so I have consecutive interior angles. So we talked about consecutive means the same side. So if I have angles that are on the same side, instead of being congruent, these are the angles that are going to be supplementary. And so supplementary means they add up to 180, all right? So if I know that angle 4 is 72, I know that angle 8 has to be the remaining amount to get me to 180. Okay, so I can do 180 minus 72 to get the measure of angle 8. And that should be 108 degrees. Okay? Now that I know that this angle right here is 108 degrees, I should be able to use alternate interior angles. Those are the angles on the inside, on opposite sides of my transversal, to figure out what angle 3 is. And these are going to be congruent. Alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. So angle 3 is going to be 108 degrees. Okay? I can do the same thing with angle 4 and angle 7. Those are alternate interior angles. If this angle is 72, angle 7 is going to be 72. Okay? We also can use linear pairs for these. I showed you guys how you know that you've got vertical angles. You also can use linear pairs to figure out what these angles are going to be. If you know that this is 72, angle 6 is a linear pair to angle 5. If this is 72, I know that this has to add up to 180. So this would be my 108 degrees again. And if I use this 108, this is an exterior angle. I can use my alternate exterior angle theorem and prove that 6 and 1 are the same because of alternate exterior angles. So angle 1 is also going to be 108 degrees. So if you notice, everything on this diagram is just 2 degrees. All you had to do was move those 2 degrees around and figure out what was going to be the same. The only angles that are not congruent, okay, are the ones that are consecutive interior. The consecutive interior angles are the ones on the same side of the transversal along the inside of your parallel lines. So 4 and 8, those are going to be supplementary. 3 and 7, those are going to be supplementary. Every other angle, alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding angles, all of those are going to be congruent. The only things that are supplementary are the consecutive interior, the ones along the same side of the transversal. Okay. So I want you guys to go through, I want you to pause the video now. You're not going to be finding any degree measures because if you look at this diagram, none of these lines are given to you as parallel. So unless they're parallel, that's the only time you can find degree measures. If you do not have any indication that they're parallel, you're not going to be able to figure out what the values are by using our theorems, okay? But we can look at these lines and determine if we have alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, or consecutive interior angles, okay? So even though we're not going to be finding any degree values, we're still going to be naming these angles based on their position, okay? Are they alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, or consecutive? So I want you guys to pause this video and work through 1 through 10.